Hey crew, Coach Josh here with GarageGangGyms.com, talking to you today about how to sumo deadlift. Exactly how if you were standing in front of me, I would want to see you do it and how I would coach you to do it. Now, I am not going to try to teach you how to utilize the sumo deadlift to lift the most weight possible in a competition situation. Now, the reason I'm saying that is I'm trying to teach you how to be strong, go through a full range of motion, pain-free, and consistently push your progress. Not necessarily maximize your width so you can shorten the range of motion so that you can kind of leverage yourself and get the most weight off the floor so that you can get a bigger number in competition. No, I'm not about that in this video. If you need help with that, I can certainly help you with that. But again, I'm trying to maximize how much muscle is being used, their full range of motion, maximize that muscle engagement as well as calories burned and a good workout with the sumo deadlift. We're gonna cover your stance, we're gonna cover the tension from the ground, so even if you are pretty versed to deadlifting, please at least stick around to the tension portion of this video because you might learn something as well doing this. We're gonna talk about grip, we're gonna talk about the difference between doing 1 rep at a time and multiple reps at a time. We'll even talk about using straps. First thing I wanna talk about is who should sumo deadlift? Now, first of all, everybody should be picking something up off the ground. It doesn't necessarily have to be a barbell, but it could be a hex bar, sumo deadlift, conventional deadlift, farmer's carries, whatever. You should be picking something up. But let's say you have a history of back discomfort. Maybe you feel a little nervous doing the traditional or conventional deadlift because it just puts a little more tension in your lower back than you'd like. The sumo deadlift would be a great alternative for you. You still get to pick something up. It's still working a lot of your body, and it's a great way to strengthen everything. But maybe the conventional deadlift is fine for you, but your knees hurt when you squat right now. The sumo deadlift can be a great alternative to squatting, right? Doing barbell squats. Instead of getting that compressive force, you can still work your quadriceps without putting so much tension through your knee, which the squat really shouldn't either. And if you feel like your squats are terrible, you can look at the description below, and I have quite a few squat videos there for you to help you guys squat better. But I use the sumo deadlift in my clients' online programs as well as my in-person clients if, let's say, they stumble, if they fall, if their knee hurts for some reason, and they still want that good quad engagement. The sumo deadlift can be great. But keep in mind, if you want the conventional deadlift to be your preferred method of deadlifting, your knees hurt from squatting, so you want to do sumos, one is gonna have to come down in intensity, right? I don't want you to be pushing your conventional deadlift as hard as you can at the same time you're trying to maximize your sumo deadlift. You may have to alternate which one gets priority so that you don't overtax your system, because whether it's the conventional deadlift or the sumo deadlift, it requires a lot from your body, more so than a squat or bench press. And third, if you're a taller person, if you have really long legs, you can actually gain an advantage over the barbell doing sumo deadlift than conventional. However, some people, even though they're taller, depending upon your torso angle, the conventional still might feel more comfortable because if you have a long torso, you're kind of built to use your lower back, right? If you have a shorter torso, the sumo deadlift, the squat, it might feel a little bit better for you. So let's sumo deadlift. Let's talk about your stance first. And some of the most important things I want you to consider is how wide are you gonna go and how do I set up so that I'm consistent every single time I lift this bar? Because if every time you lift, your feet are in a different place, we're not putting all of our effort forward in the same way. It's all like this, and it could actually set you up in the long haul for a plateau. So consistency every single time. Now, before we talk width, I want to talk about the bar that I'm using first. Now, it's not so specific that you use this bar, but something you need to know is that this bar has a standard powerlifting ring, just one of them. If the gym that you're at has a ring that I would say is somewhere in between, say, the collar here and this polished part, that's probably a standard powerlifting bar. So what I'm going to say is going to make sense to you. If you're in maybe a CrossFit gym, a weightlifting gym, they might have the ring closer to the collar and further from this texture. That's gonna be the outside ring, and some bars will have 2 rings. The inside one is the one that I'm gonna be referring to today, the powerlifting one. The outside one is that weightlifting one. The outside one can trick you into going too wide. So again, we're gonna be using this first ring here. So that's going to help us guide where we're gonna put our feet. Now, if you're wanting to work your butt extra, you would get closer to this ring or even closer to this collar out here. The wider you go, the more butt you're gonna use. But I will say, your butt can only do so much, and it really only is helping you through the lockout. And if you're too wide with your stance for your hip mobility and flexibility, it's gonna be really hard for you at the lockout. So I like to prefer more of a quadricep-based sumo deadlift. So I usually refer to this ring as like the outer limit for most people. If you're 6'5", fine. You have longer legs, fine. You might be slightly outside of this, but again, you're just learning, so we're just gonna try to figure out kind of a place to start, and then we can play with our feet as future programs come. So when it comes to our stance, the wider we make our feet, the closer I can bring my hips to the bar. So there's some pluses and minuses to that. If I can bring my hips closer to the bar, it makes it a little bit easier for me to lift. But if I'm too wide, and you can kind of see this right now, my knees want to shift in and I'm losing my stance. If I'm too far forward, right, if my toes are forward, then my tendency is going to let my hips to collapse. So we're going to play around 30 to 60 degrees. So for a lot of people, it's actually 45, where if you make a box, you're just right off in the middle, okay? So I'm going to approach this bar, and using these rings as a guide, I prefer, when I look down, that my ring lines up directly with my pinky toe. So, I'm somewhere between 5'7" and 5'8", so this just works for me. You might put maybe your big toe on the ring if you're a taller person. You might slide your feet in a little bit if you're shorter. But I want to be able to squat down to this bar. My shins should travel forward, and that's what makes this exercise a lot different than a conventional deadlift, is we're trying to use those quads, right, instead of our hamstrings. So we don't necessarily want to have to bend over a lot to get into position, because we might as well be in a conventional stance. So I'm going to bring my shins forward, squat on down. My quads are nice and active here, and my shins, depending upon how warm I am, my shins may touch, my shins might not touch, but I just want to make sure that my knee is in front of my ankle when I do this. So that's stance. And again, you should feel comfortable. You should feel like you have some control in this position. If I go too wide, all I feel is hips, and I feel like my hips are too low. If I'm too narrow, I might as well be conventional deadlifting and then put it more into my glutes and hamstrings. Now, with that said, with your stance, if you do go a lot wider, you will feel your inner thighs stretching quite a bit. And let's say the next day after sumo deadlifting, your inner thighs are pretty sore. Maybe that was a little too wide for you. But something to also consider is the narrower you go, you're gonna feel more in your lower back. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing or the wrong thing. I'm just saying that if you're lifting and you're thinking, oh, this sumo deadlift, I want it to be specifically for my quads. If you feel your lower back quite a bit, your feet might be too narrow, causing you to have to bend over. So we wanna make sure that we're just slightly over that bar as we're lifting it. And that brings us to our next point, which is tension from the floor in that position, okay? So as I was just alluding to, we wanna be in a good stance so that our shoulders can actually be in front of the bar just a little bit or just on top. As soon as our shoulders come behind the bar, our legs are no longer able to put force against that bar. And then it's usually when we are locking out, our shoulders are gonna come back because our hips are coming forward. But a lot of people, they get super wide and they try to start really, really tall where their shoulders are actually behind the bar. And if your shoulders are already behind the bar from the start, your balance is forward, our knees are forward, and that's just not a good thing. So let's figure out exactly where we want to put ourselves. So again, I'm going to look down. My pinky toes are basically directly under the lines if I were to look down. I'm going to squat down. And again, the tendency is when we grab onto this bar is to let ourselves sit back. And the reason is it takes all the pressure off our legs. The starting position of this deadlift should not be comfortable. We want to have as much tension through our body as we can, and through that tension, lift this bar. If you feel nothing when you're about to pick the bar up, then you tend to end up having to yank the bar because you just don't have tension. So your body's trying to rapidly find that tension. And the faster or more aggressive we try to pull tension into that bar, oftentimes we lose our upper back position, maybe our hips come forward. It's just not a good thing. So we want to start from the floor slow. So I'm going to squat down, and I like to squat down without putting my hands on the bar at first so that I know, yep, my legs are on, and if I stay down here too long, it's going to burn. Then I'm going to place my hands thumb distance away from each other. So I like to take my thumbs and put them together, and that's about where my grip is gonna be. If it gets a little heavier, I might go slightly wider than this just for stability support, but I certainly am not trying to do a conventional deadlift. So my thumbs are touching. I grab the center of this bar, and again, I'm squatted down. Initially, I have no tension, okay? So this is not a great place to start, and this is actually where a lot of people try because it's comfortable. So what we need to think is I'm gonna take a good breath. I'm going to lightly push into the ground a little bit while keeping my hands on the bar. When I push into the ground, what that's gonna do is take tension out of the bar so there isn't any slack. It's gonna load my quads and my arms are gonna get stretched. But again, the tendency for people is they grab onto this bar, they push against the floor a little bit, and then they'll lean back because it takes the tension away from their legs, which is more comfortable, but it's a terrible place to start your deadlift from. So again, nice stance. I'm gonna squat down, hands on the bar. I'm gonna take a big breath. I'm going to lightly push into the ground until my arms stretch. And then one last thing I'm gonna do, because otherwise I'm in this position, because my arms are stretched and my legs are engaged, is I'm gonna explain it a few different ways. First way I like to do it is I'm gonna try to take my chest, my sternum actually, and bring it in front of my shoulders. So I start here because I'm stretched. I try to bring my chest forward. Another cue people may like is to try to take your arms and pull them behind you. The reason I don't necessarily like that cue so much is anytime we think with our arms, we have a tendency to really get tight with our hands. And yes, our hands do need to hold this bar, but if we put too much tension in our arms, we're gonna bend. And if we bend, we lose so much tension on this bar, at least the tension in our body like we're trying to do it. So really try to work on pushing your chest forward before you try to think about pulling your arms back. But if that's the only way it's gonna work, fine. Some people, they have the body control when their shoulders are slumped forward like this to just roll their shoulders back and down. That can also be a great way of thinking of this, shoulders back and down. So hopefully one of those three cues works for you. So again, I'm lined up, I squat down, hands on the bar, I take a breath, stretch, and then I push my sternum forward, and I'm still maintaining this good position. From there, I'm just gonna push against the ground. So you saw I let go of this bar, but because I had great tension in my legs, it naturally caused me to stand up. So I invite you to try this yourself. Get this tension, stretch, pushing against the ground a little bit, and then just let go. Your body, if you keep pushing against the ground, you should be doing your sumo deadlift, right? Just without the bar in your hands. And this is what we wanna practice a few times to make sure, yeah, I have it figured out. Because if you let go and you stumble back, stumble forward, it isn't a smooth upward ascent. You're off balance, you're probably leaning too far one way, maybe your shoulders are behind the bar. It's a really easy, safe way to figure out, am I in the right position? Okay, so let's do this for real. As I'm driving against the ground, I'm going to just keep my body in position, pushing, 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 just as if I let go of that bar. You can see I keep my shoulders over where the bar would be. I push, and then when we get to this part, a lot of people think drive your hips forward, but you can see my knee is gonna get really soft and bend here. Then I don't have a lot of control, and then from here it's me death gripping this thing so it doesn't fall because there isn't really anything helping me lift it up. So as I'm coming up, if I just keep pushing down, pushing down, pushing down, pushing down, my hips, my glutes are naturally gonna squeeze. It's not something I should be thinking about. What I should be thinking about is, how do I get my legs taller, longer, whatever you wanna say? How do I keep pushing down, pushing, 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 because my hips will naturally come forward. And again, if I think with my hips, legs are bent, but I also put a lot of tension in my lower back. So for a deadlift, we're gonna, again, stay over that bar pretty much the whole time. As we get to the top and we are fully extending, our shoulders will naturally come behind the bar because it's just our natural hip motion to bring our shoulders back, assuming everything is tight. But all we need is for say, our armpit to come behind the bar. I see it so often that people think more is better and they try to come way back here, and that goes for unconventional as well. they just try to really maximize that hip extension. In a competition situation, depending upon the rules, it might be actually beneficial to do that because of the fact the bar could actually be lower on you and you could just lean back. But when we're trying to maximize our muscle recruitment, maximize our strength, we want to make sure that we keep our body engaged. At the top here, our shoulders will naturally come back. And if my legs are locked out at the top and I have a good posture, that's as far back as I need to go. So I'm going to hold my breath the whole time. And I can hold this all day. My butt's tight, I'm pushing against the ground, my chest is still relatively pushed through. I would be holding my breath and not talking to you. If I'm gonna set this down, I'm gonna try to do this in reverse. I'm gonna hold my breath first, chest stays out, and squat, back down, and then I could rep it multiple times. I recommend to you when you're first learning, you pick it up, set it down, take a second, reset your feet, breathe, get down, breathe, chest, push, put it down, take a second. So we just practice picking it up, setting it down, resetting our mind every single time to add that consistency. Now I do want to talk about a little bit of a nitty-gritty thing going on with your feet, okay? So when we sumo deadlift, we are not perfectly balanced in our feet. Okay, what do I mean by that? If we're squatting, let's say, we want to have, equal pressure down, on the inside, outside, front, back of our foot so we have stability. On our conventional deadlift, it's similar to that. We may favor a little forward initially off the floor and then come back a little bit as we're rounding past the knee and then kind of fit in the middle. With the sumo deadlift, we're going to be like 60-40, maybe even 70-30, favoring the inside edges of our feet. The reason being is when we're getting down here and as we're pushing, the inside edges of our feet are going to help anchor us to the floor. And if we start pushing too much through our pinky toes, now we're in this position where our knees do need to come in a little bit. They're not dropping inside of my feet. They're still staying between my big toe and my second toe as I'm coming up. But if I push out too far, because I'm trying to really maximize my glute engagement or whatever, what's gonna happen is, again, I'm gonna actually have a weird twist in my knee, twisting force as I come up, and all I'm gonna feel is in my hips. And then I actually find myself falling to the outside edge of my feet and losing a lot of leg engagement because my big toe knuckle and the inner edge of my heel come off of the ground slightly. Even just a little bit makes a big difference. Plus, if I'm putting that much pressure on the outside edge, even if it's 50-50, and say I lean back a little too much, I go from 50-50 to leaning back, now it's 60-40. If something happens and I gotta get rid of the bar, I let go, I'm off balance, right? Where if I'm allowing myself to put just a little bit more pressure on the inside edge, again, not so extreme, but slightly more, as I come up, if I have to drop, I'm ready, I can just stop. If I'm out here, I fall. So as you're picking this up off the ground, if you want to think about where do I push with my feet, again, slightly favor the inside edge of your foot. As you get more comfortable, maybe deeper into your workout, maybe multiple weeks of practicing it one at a time, then you can start doing what are called touch and go reps, where you basically stay on the bar, which is what I'm actually going to show you next. So if you're going to rattle through multiple reps in a row, we're going to use 3 as an example so I don't get too tired so I can talk to you. What we need to make sure is anytime the bar is moving, we have our brace set. We're holding our breath. So we can take a breath or breathe out when the bar is on the floor. We could also take a breath and or breathe out at the top. We are not trying to breathe in or out when that bar is moving. And that's so important because if we're breathing in or breathing out, our pressures in our core are changing. And that's just opening up the possibility of us losing our position, okay? So we're gonna get into position. I'm gonna do a few reps and talk to you as I go. So I'll take my breath, push against the ground a little bit, push my chest in front of my shoulders, and stand all the way up. Here we go. Now, did I need to take a breath at the bottom, a breath at the top every time? No. Do you need to? No. But when you're first learning, you might be going a lot slower, and at the top, maybe it took you 3 seconds to get up there, and you're like, it's tiring, right? It gets kind of hard. I just wanted to show you, this is a good time to breathe, this is a good time to breathe. Now, something I really want to point out, which is why I'm talking about these touch and go reps, is if you think back to what you saw me doing, when I set it down, I made sure I quickly ran through my checklist. My checklist was, take a breath, push down, chest through, then go. Every single rep. And as you get better, you'll be able to rattle through that checklist a lot quicker. Again, like we talked about earlier with our stance, it's all about consistency. If I set it down, grab it any which way, set it down, grab it any which way, first of all, I'm not affecting the same muscles, right? Maybe I'm doing a little quad here, a little back on the next rep, a little butt on that one. So I'm not even getting a consistent stimulus throughout my body. But if my body is changing that dramatically every single rep because I just don't care about my stance, now our risk for injury is going up. I'm not saying you're gonna hurt yourself, but it's just not useful, okay? What is useful is making sure every rep is as similar as we can, because not only are we affecting the same muscles again and again and again, you'll actually get that burn you might be searching for. But if tomorrow, let's say you wake up or the next day and you're like, oh, my knee hurts or my back hurts or whatever, it's not that the exercise is bad, but if you were consistent enough with your form, that could help us figure out what the heck went wrong. If you're recording yourself, I highly recommend you get a view similar to what you see me doing here, because you'll be able to see, are my knees caving? Did I round over? What happened that I might be feeling this pain the next day? But if you're not recording it and you're just kind of willy-nilly pulling this off the ground, who knows why you're sore in the morning? It could be an okay thing because, hey, you just pushed yourself, or it's a terrible thing because, hey, you were dumb, okay? If you need help looking at those videos, I just started a Facebook group, and I'll leave a description or a link in the description below. Please join it. Upload your video there if you don't mind me publicly talking about your form so other people can benefit from that. I am more than happy to help you figure out what's going on with your deadlifts, as well as answer any questions that you may have, again, the Facebook group. So another thing that can happen when you're doing the touch and go is you'll start to, again, you're gonna get burning, your legs are burning, your lungs are on fire, your heart's pounding, it's getting tough. Maybe you're doing a hard set of 5 or whatever you're doing. And the tendency will be you start leaning back because it'll take tension off your legs. It's so important that as you put that bar down, you say to yourself, no, I need to have tension from the floor. If I don't have tension, it's gonna be put somewhere, and it's typically in your lower back. So I'll try to talk you through what thoughts I'm having and not so much cue you on exactly how to do it, but more so tell you, okay, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm doing. Here we go. So I'm squatting down, hands on, I'm gonna take a breath, push, chest, push, control, hips, big breath, push, down, big breath, push, down, keep that chest up, push your chest forward, and rest. So those are some of the things I was thinking about, right? Oh, my chest was dropping, push it out, do this, do that. Again, it's very similar to the cues I'm telling you, and I want you to have those cues running through your head. So now, one thing I do want to talk about is how you're holding the bar, your grip. As you see what I'm doing what's called a double overhand grip. The nice thing about that is I can evenly set my posture. I'm not being pulled in any direction, so I'm kind of telling you why I don't recommend the next grip I'm about to show you. But anyway, I can really set, it's even, I have a nice posture. Oftentimes with conventional deadlift, you'll see people flipping one of their hands, and I'm fine with that, right? If you don't compete though, I recommend you guys get a pair of straps. Oh, but it's gonna affect my grip strength. Not necessarily, you grab a lot of things. I would rather you have a double overhand grip when you're deadlifting, if you're not competing, than flipping your hand. And the reason being is, number one, if you shovel, if you broom, if you do anything like that, you already are favoring one side. So you're gonna have a dominant side that you prefer. And on the heaviest weights, most likely you're always gonna lean into that side. And what is that gonna do? It's going to teach your body to twist just a little bit, Could it cause injury? Not necessarily, but what are you doing? You're causing more stress one way than the other way based on how your grip is, right? And most people don't feel comfortable enough to switch. Even I, who doesn't do flip grip, I haven't done it in years, I still don't feel as comfortable this way as this way because of all the times that I've deadlifted this way long ago. So I highly recommend you invest in some straps. And if you're seriously considering competition, I know it's in the minority of people who do this. I highly recommend hook grip for your longevity. Initially, does it rip your thumbs up? Sure. Can you put tape on and avoid some of those things? Absolutely. But again, that double overhand grip, especially if you sumo deadlift, is so much more comfortable. Because if you start flipping your hand, what'll end up happening is as you're deadlifting, your hand gets dragged across and you have a tendency to squeeze to one side more than the other because your one hand kind of gets caught. Where when you're double overhand, your hands are gonna fit a lot better between your legs so that as you're coming up, you're not catching anything and you get to stay even. But again, if you're not competing, I highly recommend a pair of straps. Any straps will do, whether you're using these weightlifting style straps or the ones that have like a brace on your wrist and they're called lasso. They have a really long strip to them. Either way is fine with me. I do recommend if you're getting a lasso or even these, you only put one loop around the bar. As soon as you start making 2, 3, 4 loops on that bar, you now don't have a way to just let go. If you have 4 loops or 3 loops on that bar, there's so much friction that as you're lifting it, let's say you're like, nope, it's not happening and you need to let go. Maybe something traumatic happens and you need to let go. If you have multiple loops on that thing, you're attached to that bar. That bar is gonna yank you down. So 1 loop is best for safety. And I've found only putting 1 loop on, it's only moderately helping your grip. It's not taking your hands out of the equation completely like multiple loops on the lasso. So if you're using straps, it's the same concept. You still want your thumbs about that distance away we were talking about before. Put a little bit of tension on those straps. Big breath, push, and back down. The nice thing too about straps is if you find yourself monkey gripping or death gripping these bars, the straps will actually allow you to let your hand be a little bit more open, which isn't ideal, but it lets you have your hand a little bit more open so you can get more stretch through your arms so that you can help eliminate that arm bend. Because I would much rather you use straps to eliminate the arm bend than say, oh, I'm not gonna use straps because it's bad for my grip, and you end up having, elbow tendonitis because you're death gripping that bar. So there you have it, guys. I walked you through how to sumo deadlift so that you guys can maximize your body's engagement. Maybe you're doing this as an alternative to the conventional deadlift. Maybe you're doing it because it's just fun. Maybe you're doing it because your knees hurt when you squat and this is just something to supplement your quad engagement in the meantime while you're figuring out what's going on with your squat. Any which way, you guys just learned how to do it really well. So I want to remind you that I do have a Facebook group if you guys need help. Please send me videos of your sumo deadlifts, send me videos of any of your exercises, and I will review them for you there. Also, if you have questions, we're doing polls all the time. What videos should we do next? All kinds of things so you guys can be part of this community more than just a subscriber on YouTube. I want you guys to feel like you have some input. And over on the Facebook group is exactly where you can do it. You can tell me I'm an idiot. That's totally fine. You could leave a comment down below, say I'm an idiot. I'll laugh it off and we'll just move on for the day. But this is Coach Josh with GarageGangGyms.com, and I'll see you next time.